Hi, now I've been joined by Senator Kevin Witkos. Kevin is also a newly elected senator to our circle. Welcome, Kevin, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me here.
I want to just talk to you a little about, you were part of the House, and how long did you serve as a representative?
I served 3 terms, which is 6 years.
And what towns did you represent?
I represented my hometown of Canton and additionally the town of Avon.
Okay, and currently you're the senator of the 8th district.
Right.
And that would include how many additional towns did you pick up by picking up that district?
There's 11 towns, so 9 additional. And if you're going to ask me, I have them memorized. Avon, Barkhamstead, Canton, Colebrook, Granby, Hartland, Harwinton, New Hartford, Simsbury, and Torrington.
Well, you passed the test. That's pretty good. And how do you find your duties from state representative? I know it's early because we're still in our first session and only a few weeks into it at that. How do you find the duties of a representative versus a state senator? How would you differentiate between those responsibilities of those two offices?
Well, you do represent a larger amount of the population in Connecticut. As a state rep, I represent about 23,000 people, and now as a state senator, about 93,000. So I've more than tripled my base that I have of constituents. And I think that as a new senator, you have a lot of requests that people want to come out and meet you and get to know a little bit about you and what you stand for, and so that's different. And also meeting within the caucus, I found to be different. In
what ways? A caucus is when Republicans and Democrats sort of get together to discuss bills. So there are a lot less people, obviously, with our group of senators. There's 12 of us. And in the House, when you were a representative, how many?
Yeah, we had 44 in our.
So in what ways was the caucus different, the discussion around the table? How did that?
Well, I think the big difference was in the House, since there were 44 of us, it was more of a top-down type discussion as to this is our plan of how we're going to present ourselves during the debate. What do you think about it? Let's have some input. Whereas in the Senate, in the circle, if you will, the leadership builds it from the ground up. And so you feel like you're part of the building of the debate from the beginning and work its way to when you actually go out into the chamber and debate the bill.
You know, it's one of the things, I never was a rep, so as a state senator, there's 36 of us in that circle. And I know in the House there's 151 representatives. I never understood how you guys can debate an issue with 151 people. It's always perplexed me. How do you find that being different up at the circle versus down the House? Do you feel that you have more of an input, more of the ability to get your voice heard than in the House? Can you reflect upon that?
Sure, and one of the interesting things that I've noticed about that was in the House there was a machine when you pushed your button request to speak, you got to see where you were in the speaking order, so if you had to run out of the room for a minute, you could do that, whereas in the Senate, you just jump up and you stand up for your microphone, you have to be recognized. So that was a big difference for me coming forward. But I think you can be heard in both chambers. I think you get lost in the House because there's a lot of distraction because people are having sidebar conversations. And since we are early in the Senate session, still a little new, but I think that people tend to pay more attention and focus when the individual senator is speaking.
Now, the other thing, interesting fact people should know about you is you're a police officer.
Right. In
what town?
I'm a police sergeant in the town of Canton on my 20th year.
Wow. And how do you find doing both roles, the legislative role and your duties as a sergeant?
Well, you know, I've been a public servant my entire life, and I think being a senator is an extension of being a public servant that I've done as a police sergeant. And it's very rewarding. And I think if I didn't have that public service as a police sergeant, I wouldn't have gotten elected in the first place. Because you're out in the community.
Is that what sort of made you run? Is it like being a sergeant, being sort of on the ground, talking to people, then deciding to come up here and try to make a difference?
Absolutely. You know, as a police sergeant, I saw people in the best of times and in the worst of times. And they would share their experiences with me, and we'd talk about what people get to talk about when they get together. And eventually, sometimes the talk would lead to politics. And I said, well, you know, I agree. And they said, do something about it. Why don't you run? So I threw my hat in the ring and I ran.
Well, you do a great job.
Thank you.
You're a great member of the caucus, and we really appreciate your input.
Thanks.
And we'll be back with our last guest, who will be State Senator Scott France. Now you can look at Rachel.